Yeah.
I believe we are live for episode 66 of Trek Live.
Okay.
What are we talking about today, Bill?
We are going to talk about the scariest Star Trek alien species. So it's kind of a little bit of a different spin on the same sort of topic that we had last week with scariest moments. These are going to be scariest alien species or aliens. Some of the ones that I'm picking are more kind of like one-offs than like a huge species. Kind of stretched it to fit a few more in.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's October, so we figure we should go with some horror, scary Halloween sort of topics, and I think this is a cool one. So Grin Salem's here. How you doing? Let us know if our live stream is like smooth and you can hear us.
Yep.
We're not having any technical issues. So it would be good to hear. And we definitely want to hear from you. If you're in the chat as we're going, tell us who your scary alien species are. Did any freak you out as a kid and leave a lasting impression in that way? Do any scare you now? We definitely are curious to hear what you have to say. I don't know about you, but when we first kind of landed on this topic and I started thinking about it, I was having a little bit of a hard time at first, like putting together like a sizable list. But the deeper I kind of cut into it and like looked at episode lists and like stared at my DVD shelf and just kind of like thought about episodes, I started to put together a much bigger list. Some of them are a little less obvious, a little more deep cut. But Star Trek's got a pretty good bench of scary aliens to talk about. What about you? Did you have an easy time with this topic? Did you have to scrape?
I had a pretty easy time. I'm kind of with you. The more I thought about it, the more I was like, it keeps adding up and up and up.
Yeah.
Which was good. So.
Yeah. Grin Salem says humans are the most scary, which true. That's a fair point. Can't argue with that. So right off the bat, we have humans named. That's the number one choice. So we're gonna dive in and talk about as many as we can think of, and as many as we can hear from you guys. We'll go as many as we come across as we talk about the topic. Have you watched any Star Trek in the last week?
I have not. I've been bad. My rewatch's kind of slowing down a little bit.
Okay.
What about you? Have you watched anything?
My rewatch picked up a little bit. I was where you were the last couple of weeks. I kind of took a few weeks off in between seasons 1 and 2 of TOS. And last night I started season 2 and watched a mock time, which is freaking awesome. It's like quintessentially perfect Star Trek. Like everything you could possibly want in a Star Trek episode is in a mock time.
Yeah.
Definitely one of my all-time favorites. I watched 2 more for Adonais, the Apollo episode, and the Changeling. So I got the first 3 of season 2 in, and I started late for me. So I could have kept going. I definitely felt the wind at my sails and like feeling good about watching TOS. I could have put a bigger dent in if I would have started a little earlier, but it was a good start. I think I like the way season 2 starts, and I put a tweet out before I started. This period of Star Trek, like the end of season 1, beginning of season 2, is freaking loaded with like unbelievably classic episodes.
Yep.
I put something out as I was kind of wrapping up season 1 about how the last handful of episodes contains Spacey, Devil in the Dark, The Side of Paradise, The City on the Edge of Forever, Errand of Mercy, like really quintessential, like important episodes, groundbreaking and world building episodes. And then the beginning of season 2 starts, and you get a mock time, you get Mirror Mirror, you get the Doomsday Machine. So like that group of like 12 episodes from the end of season 1 to the beginning of season 2 is one of the peak periods where you're just getting classic after classic. So I love this part of the rewatch every time I get to it. Today is the time for Sub Rosa, isn't it? Is there ever a time for Sub Rosa? I don't know. Other than if you're other than if you're a completionist and you're rewatching like me or Dan, and you get to it, I guess you watch it. But other than that, I don't know. Sub Rosa is an interesting episode, but it does fit in these kinds of topics. It's got some horror elements. It's got some quote scary stuff going on. Some of it's really scary. Some of it maybe not intentional. But yeah, it's a good time to watch Sub Rosa, I guess, given that it has some footing in the horror genre.
Yep.
Yeah, so I guess we should just dive right in. Talk about these species. I guess we'll go back and forth, alternate, take one at a time. You pick one, I pick one, go back and forth until we're kind of out of choices. So why don't you start? What's the first one you kind of want to talk about, and is it the first one that came to mind when you thought about this stuff?
It wasn't the first one that came to mind, but it's something that I kind of wanted to talk about. My first pick is gonna go I'm gonna go with Discovery Klingons.
Okay.
And I think
cool
to me they're scary, and I think that it kind of pays homage to TOS Klingons that are a little bit more menacing and devious than later Klingons. So that's why I went them, because they're one of my favorite species. And the reason why is because I feel like they're scary, and intimidating and frightening, and so I couldn't leave them off my list.
I agree. I think one of the best things about the redesign, or shaking up the look of the Klingons, is they kind of refresh them. It's like hitting the refresh button and making them scary again. Putting us, the audience, a little bit on our heels when we're dealing with the Klingons in a way that maybe we haven't in a while, because we've seen the Klingons so much in their classic look. I think it was important because of the story Discovery was telling, with going into wartime and putting the crew and Starfleet on its heels. I think it was important for the creative team to come up with a way to make the Klingons a little intimidating to the audience too. And I think maybe that was part of the reason that Brian Fuller, wanted to redesign them a little bit and not make them the same old that we're kind of all used to seeing, especially towards the back end of like 90s era Trek. Not so much Enterprise with the prequel idea, but by TNG and Deep Space Nine and Voyager, those Klingons that we're used to seeing are not adversaries. They're not somebody that we're really fighting most of the time. They're allies.
Yeah.
Other than a little brief period of Deep Space Nine, where the Dominion kind of start some trouble between the Klingons and the Federation. For the vast majority of the time, the Klingons are friendly to Starfleet. So I think changing the look played a big part in, the creative direction they were going in. It made it. I think it made it work as well as it did for those who like the show. So I think it's a really good pick. I think it fits in with it's a story driven thing too. Like I was saying. And they are scary from a visual, just purely looking at them. They're imposing and threatening, and when you factor in the cultural stuff going on, the battle, bloodthirsty, they're gonna kill you, and enjoy doing it. The look really plays into that, so that's a good pick.
Yeah, because I felt like I just got kind of comfortable with the Klingons,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
this kind of just flipped it on its head, where I'm like, oh, I'm a little uncomfortable with, with these guys and how they act.
Yeah.
So.
Agreed. Yeah, I feel the same way. For me, I guess I'll start with kind of a boring one that I think we kind of have to talk about, which is the Borg. They're on our thumbnail. The Borg are an interesting one. We've covered the Borg a good bit on this show. We talk a lot about. We've had a lot of topics about Voyager, and we did First Contact, where the Borg kind of, loom large in topics like that. But the Borg, especially early on in Q Who, in The Best of Both Worlds, in First Contact, and Scorpion, even, they're pretty scary. The inability to talk and negotiate and reason with them, their relentlessness, not interested in really killing you. They're more interested in violating you and altering you to suit their mission and their needs. I think makes them different and makes them the classic antagonists that they are. So I don't think a list like this can be complete without talking about the Borg. So we've covered some pretty mainstream, like obvious picks right off the top, which is the right way to go, I think, and to dive into our deep cut picks as we go along. But Klingons from Discovery and the Borg are kind of linchpin, like I think obvious choices. And yeah, I mean, what do you think? Do you find the Borg scary?
The Borg was one of my picks, so that's my next pick is the Borg. Also, you asked me, what was the first villain that I thought of? It was the Borg, and I think they're the kind of the classic, quintessential, scary alien species. So I had to pick them too. So
yeah, cool.
Yep.
Another one for me was that kind of came to mind pretty early on in the process thinking about this. The Horta, which is kind of a different kind of choice in that they're not scary at the end of the episode. Yeah. They're actually very kind of they become an ally. They're not scary at the end of the day. That's kind of the whole point. Once you get to know them and you get to an understanding, they're not so bad after all. But at the beginning of the episode, in the teaser, when the attack happens and you see a poor sap kind of security officer on this mining detail get like burned alive by this other kind of creature, non-humanoid thing that's kind of lurking in the shadows. That's pretty classic horror stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that's what makes the episode effective. That it is scary at the beginning. It's something that you have to, there's an obstacle there to come to an understanding. It's an easy leap to make that this thing is scary and has to be destroyed and can't be reasoned with. And what makes it such a classic episode is that Kirk and Spock aren't stopped by that. They're kind of unfazed by those horror elements of the Horta and get to that place. So I think the Horta had to be scary for that episode to work. At least in the big chunk of it, the first half of it, at least. Did the Horta come to mind for you when you thought of this, or is that...
It did, but I didn't think of it as a scary because the ending,
Yeah, sure.
The ending kind of for me took away, the scary factor. It was definitely something that I thought of kind of later on down the road, as far as like a TOS alien species, but. Yeah, that's why it stayed off my list because of the ending of the episode.
Sure, I can understand that. Yeah, that's a fair point. What's next on your list? What else did you find scary?
The next on my list is the City Alpha Eel. I know we kind of talked about this last week, and I'll just do a quick thing. It technically is an alien species. I'm kind of cheating here. Sure. Again, along with the Borg. This also came to mind when I thought of alien species. I think it's cool, kind of sci-fi type scary alien species that to me in my eyes is one of the more iconic alien species. And I had to mention it because it's one of the scariest. So
for sure. I think we both landed on that moment. That's maybe the scariest thing in Star Trek history, the most effective like horror kind of moment. So I think we'd be remiss again if we didn't cite it as an example of a scary alien species. It is a species. It's indigenous to that planet. It's like the one living thing that has like survived the disaster on that planet, other than guys. But they're definitely scary. They're a cool prop. Like they're an effective like practical special effect, I guess. It's the moving puppet kind of thing. So on like a production level, I think they work really well for, a 35, 40-year-old movie. I think they hold up really well, and it's, they're scary. There's another way to put it. Yeah.
Yes. Your next pick.
I'll go back to TOS and go all the way back to the very first episode that ever aired, which is the Man Trap, and it's the M113 Salt Vampire. that's kind of an iconic image from Star Trek. You know,
Yeah,
that sequence at the end when it shows itself and attacks Kirk. And I think Shatner's performance kind of sells it even more. His scream when the salt vampire is grabbing him by the face and starting the process of extracting all of the salt out of his body, it makes it even more scary than it is just visually. But the concept of the creature is pretty terrifying. This like shape shifting thing that, you know, lures you in by taking on the appearance of something that you find attractive, whether it's something from your memory or something that you're just inclined to like. It kind of brings your guard down that way and gets you to show it some affection and get close to it, and then it does what it does. It consumes your salt. But TOS doesn't play the horror game very often like that. But that's early on with the first episode that was ever aired, very much kind of with footing in that territory. Pretty iconic. You know, practical suit. You know, it's not a special effect. It's not like a CG creature like a lot of the later stuff. It's a costume that's pretty effective, and more effective than another creature that I'm sure I'm going to mention from TOS. But maybe hasn't held up over time quite as well as this one, I think. Has a little bit more of a camp value than this one. I think this one really kind of does stand the test of time pretty well as a costume. Yeah. Did that come to mind for you? Is that something that you thought of?
It did come to mind, but I knew you'd pick it, so I'd let you have it.
Okay.
Cool. I think it's a cool sci-fi kind of villain idea. It's not like, you know, a typical bad guy. You know, he's got some sort of weapon or something like that. He, you know, extracts pretty much the life out of you. So I think it's definitely a menacing and terrifying species. So and in true Star Trek fashion, like the Devil in the Dark with the Horta, at the end of the episode, there's some sympathy. It doesn't make the turn the way the Horta does. It's I think acting instinctually and isn't going to change the way the Horta does. But it in true Star Trek fashion, it puts the shoe on the other foot a little bit and plays the empathy card the way Star Trek does when it's at its best. What about you? What's next on your list? Next on my list, and we can maybe have a little bit of debate about this. I went with Armas from the Skin of Evil, and I was going to ask you this: is he a species, or, you know, like, I don't know. I'd love to hear your take on it.
I like I said at the beginning, I picked a couple of kind of more one-offs, and Armas is one that I had in mind. He's not really a species; he's a creation.
Yeah, I was gonna say
this alien ancient society took all of their species evil and like bad habits and bad feelings and embodied this one thing with it and sent it off to some faraway planet. So I guess it's technically maybe not a species as much as it's like I don't know. It depends on how you
that's
look
why
at
I was
it.
Like, he's on my list because he's so scary. Probably like one of the single most scary, frightening characters ever in Star Trek. I think the stakes get amplified with the use of a death of a crew member correctly. And again, I just have to mention this because I just like it's a great episode. I think that, you know, Picard, him going one-on-one with Picard was cool, and even just, I don't know, just the production value of his character was cool, and his voice and everything. It's just, I think he's scary.
I agree. I definitely agree. I think the debate that you can have about is he an alien species or some sort of creation, I think almost makes him more scary. Undefinable. Like you don't even know what to call him or what exactly he is. Makes him all the more imposing and threatening. It makes it more difficult to figure out how to deal with him. But yeah, I think we did an episode way back that it was probably one of my favorite topics that we've ever done, which was on death in Star Trek. And we spent a lot of time talking about Tasha Yar and in this episode, how I think we both think that it was used appropriately and kind of ahead of its time, the way that it kind of unceremoniously off the main character in a way that is story driven. I think that that early death and that quick death makes Armas all the more threatening for that episode. And later in the episode, when Riker gets dragged into the his pit of pool of it's evil. That it raises the stakes for that moment when another crewman gets attacked like that, because he already killed Tasha. He's capable of anything. And the fact that he is sort of like the Borg, the Borg you can't even talk to. Armas will talk to you. Yeah. But there is no reasoning really with Armas. His only interest is in inflicting pain and suffering on anything it can come into contact with. There's no winning with him, which is again what makes him scary. It's not just a bad guy to kind of talk your way out of a situation with, or even battle your way out of a situation with. Picard has to really be on the top of his game and get creative, and they have to come up with a kind of a unique solution to get out of the problem. So I love that you picked him. I'm glad I wasn't alone and I didn't have to be the one that introduced this whole idea of what exactly is it. You did that for me. There's no easy answer to that, but I think if you just define it as a scary alien or a scary character, he's clearly alien to the crew. He's different.
Yes. Yep.
And he is definitely scary. So I'm going to say he safely qualifies for this conversation. Yeah. So that's another shared pick. What's up? Anybody else for you? Who else is on your list?
I've got a final pick.
Okay.
And to me, they're almost up there. I keep saying this about every pick, but it's probably probably the scariest alien species ever, and it's the Vidiians.
Yeah. Vidiians.
I think it's a cool idea to see this civilization go from the best in itself to like the ugliest, and I think circumstances create the scariness of it. They're doing what they have to, and even if it's terrible things like that, and I think this species to me looks the scariest, but also the actions they do are the scariest too. So watching Voyager for the first time, it was just terrifying to think of, an alien species that would come and harvest your organs. I just, even saying that is just like, oh, this is
it's
just
disgusting.
Scary. Yeah.
Yep. It is.
Yeah.
They are scary. And I think what you said at the beginning there, about how it's the Vidiians weren't born this way. The Vidians were not, weren't brought up as a society this way. The Vidians are doing this sort of out of, the need to survive. That speech in the transporter room that the one Vidiian gives Janeway about, that they were once a species of artists and sculptors and, great artists, that they were as intellectually advanced as anybody, but were just kind of inflicted with this devastating disease. And, you can just imagine that, maybe the best of the Vidiians who weren't willing to go to these lengths were killed off. And because they weren't willing to go to these lengths, and the only ones who, were able to survive and push the society forward are the ones who were most apt to, play to the worst instincts and to go these dark roads to try to survive. Yeah. So that's all that's left are these versions of the Vidiians who are so desperate that they're willing to, take anybody down to advance and live another day. That makes them scary. It makes them scarier and more interesting that they're not just an alien species that goes around and does this. That there's a backstory to them, and that why they're doing what they're doing. And there's food for thought there. And I agree. Any list of scary alien species is not complete without talking about the Vidiians. They in early Voyager, whenever they pop up in Phage and Faces and Deadlock and Coda, they never cease to be scary. in the simplest terms. But they're an imposing. I use that word a lot in these kinds of conversations, and that's a big part of it. Like, do they pose like a legitimate threat to the crew? And in Deadlock, when you see them, like I talked about last week, kind of roaming the corridors of the ship because they were able to board and just kind of easily mowing people down and yanking organs out of people. Watching that happen goes a long way towards establishing the threat of these guys. So definitely a really good pick.
It also scares me because it's when I try to think of, like, okay, if I was in their shoes, that's that's a scary thing to think about. Would you die or do anything, whatever it takes to survive? And I don't know, that's scary to me. So
and it's not even like just yourself. Like in Phage, when the two guys are together, the guy who's giving the speech is talking about that he was trying to save his friend, like his companion. So it's like not even just would you save yourself, it's would you save your loved ones,
family, your loved ones.
When you're watching your family and people that you care about get taken down by this disease, and we all know that in real life we'd do anything for our loved ones in those kinds of situations. The Vidiians, maybe because they were so advanced and had this advanced medical technology and are able to do all these things, have these options at their disposal that they can go out there and get new organs from anybody they want. That opens a lot of possibilities. And you're right. When you put the shoe on your own foot and, put yourself in their situation, it's thought provoking. It's compelling to think about, how far you'd be willing to go. And I think Janeway, and she's hearing that speech in Phage, hearing the Vidiian kind of reason why they're doing what they're doing. She's empathetic. She understands. She finds it despicable and can't wrap her head around doing something like that. But I think it speaks a lot to her character that she's moved by it. She sees their side of it too. So yeah, definitely a good pick. The Vidiians are classics. I wish they were in it a little more, but maybe the fact that they're not in it a whole lot makes them even scarier too. That they were not overused. They're in it maybe 4 or 5 times, 6 times tops in those first couple of seasons of Voyager. They're used sparingly, and when they're used, they're effective and are threatening. Yep. So I have a couple other ones that maybe didn't come to mind quite as quickly. I'll just mention the Jem'Hadar, which are very present in Deep Space Nine, and you definitely get to know them. But I think in early Deep Space Nine, sort of the same way the Borg were in early TNG, those first few times that you see the Jem'Hadar, I think they're pretty imposing and scary. They're unreasonable, and they're just there to kill. They're killing machines. They're not. They have no personality. They have no likes or dislikes. They have no family. They have no interest other than following the Dominion's orders, and they're going to kill no matter what. They're the perfect soldier. They have no inhibitions. They have no fears. They have no, nobody to live to go back to at home. I think they do a really good job in early Deep Space Nine of making them a real threat. The Jem'Hadar. I also, just to throw Enterprise some love, the Vox Sola web alien, which is disgusting, and there's a lot of jokes. I remember when that episode aired, people made comments about what that thing looks like. But so it's an example of an alien and other non-humanoid and kind of like the Devil in the Dark. It's not, at the end of the day, really a threat. It's about understanding it and figuring out that it's just trying to get back to where it's coming from. It's trying to communicate in the way it knows how to communicate, and is so other that it's very difficult to reason with it and to get on the same page as it. But it's in that episode, I think they do a pretty good job of making it threatening and making it a legitimate obstacle to overcome. Those two things, did they sort of come to mind at all for you, or
a little bit? They were definitely kind of down there.
Sure, yeah.
On secondary systems, so to speak. Another, which they're still great picks. I think there's a few others that I kind of thought of. Series 8472.
Yep.
And the sphere builders from Enterprise also came to mind too.
Yeah.
So yeah,
They're
there's
good.
definitely a lot of good picks out there that once you start digging into each episode and each series, you definitely kind of find more than you expected. So
Definitely.
yeah.
8472, especially early, like I remember seeing them for the first time. That was the first time that Star Trek really went the like CG created alien species route.
Yeah.
That makes them scary. They're very different than what you're used to seeing at that point in Star Trek history. They're different, and the fact that they're easily dispensing with Borg cubes and that because we know so much about the Borg and how threatening them.
We thought they were the top dog, and
yeah,
and now they're
absolutely. Like this is coming after a few years after the Best of Both Worlds, and pretty right on the heels of First Contact when the Borg are kind of at their peak and at their most threatening and at their popularity with kind of Star Trek, and having these guys come into town. And was definitely a big deal. And the sphere builders are a cool pick. They're very omnipotent and have a lot of power. They're out of time and are manipulating the timeline and manipulating space and physics in order to play up their agenda. So they're good. And sort of the last two, and then like kind of an off the beaten path pick that I think is maybe a little bit of an interesting conversation. I'm going to throw out there. The two are the alien parasites that we talked about last week from Conspiracy. I think they're scary.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah, they are unsettling and memorably kind of like 8472. They're being different, different kind of, not just a humanoid alien. I think makes them memorable and different. And the Aliens and Schisms, the TNG episode from season 6 that you're kind of coming up on a little bit down the road on your rewatch. They're the ones who are kind of abducting the crew when they're sleeping. You never see their faces. They're just in like hoods and you hear them clicking. They took Riker's arm off and reattached it. They're like kind of experimenting on humans. It's like your classic like alien abduction, the way that like we think of alien abduction stuff happening. I think they're pretty scary. They have like big long, claws that you see them. You never really get a look at their face much, like a little bit in the dark, but you just kind of see their body form and their sounds. Grant Salem saying the shapeshifter from Deep Space Nine. You never quite know if it's really a person. The shapeshifters, the Cylons from Battlestar Galactica are kind of the same kind of conceit that you never quite know who you're dealing with. You're constantly on your toes that you could be talking to one of them and not even know it. So yeah, definitely a good choice there. But the kind of off the beaten path one that I kind of alluded to earlier with talking about the salt vampire from TOS, the Gorn. The Gorn is from TOS. They are the Gorn is crazy. The Gorn doesn't hold up so well these days. But the idea of the Gorn, what they were getting at, maybe in 1967, 1966, they were a little bit more effective than maybe they are now. But I mean, did the Gorn pop into your mind at all talking about this, or the corniness of the 50 years later keep them off?
It did pop up in my mind because I love the Gorn. I love Arena.
Who doesn't?
I just don't think they held up as well as some of the other picks. But I still love that's one of my favorite TOS episodes. And I love the Gorn.
The Gorn and the Tholians kind of go hand in hand for me in a way because they're both original TOS aliens that we only see one other time in Enterprise, of all things.
Yes.
And I think the thing that separates, and the Tholians were one that I saw mentioned on Twitter, who I didn't pick because I think they're so infrequently seen and maybe a little less iconic than the Gorn. But the difference there, the reason I think the Tholians are more scary than the Gorn is when you see the Tholians in Enterprise in A Mirror Darkly, the same place you see the Gorn in Enterprise. I think they do a better job of realizing the Tholians in the Enterprise Mirror Universe episode than they do the Gorn. the Gorn in Enterprise is a very different kind of thing.
Yeah.
The Gorn in TOS, and I think they
Yeah.
felt really boxed in by the Gorn because the Gorn is the Gorn from Arena,
Mhm.
and trying to recreate that in Enterprise. I think they went the sort of more like Velociraptor
Yeah,
kind of
the opposite way. Yeah.
yeah, he's very different than the Gorn that you remember. And I
Mhm.
think that experience in a Mirror Darkly made it more difficult for me to make the leap to even put the Gorn really on this list. Where the Tholians, and when you see them in Enterprise, just in the brig, for the couple times that you see them, are a little closer to what I think you would imagine the Tholians from TOS to be if you ever got a really good look at them.
Mhm.
So the Tholians are another like sort of secondary that kind of was an offshoot a little bit. Didn't make the list, but I feel better about the Tholians than even the Gorn.
Yeah.
So yeah. One other one that's not an alien species that I'll throw out there that I've seen a lot of people talk about being afraid of, like because you saw them all the time, because they were in the end credits. It was in the end credits of TOS a lot. Is the puppet from the Corbomite maneuver, Balok's head. That puppet. I've the number of people that I've heard say that they were like horrified of that as a kid when they were watching TOS, like whenever that would come up on the end credits, is pretty amazing. And I agree. Like it's a pretty scary thing. It's a weird look, and the fact that it's a puppet and that they're kind of telling you it's a puppet, I think almost makes it even more scary. Like it's a little more like unanimated and unalive than a lot of these other things. There's something about it that is kind of like, whoa, that's pretty weird and unsettling. So definitely not an alien species. It's literally a puppet, but it's effectively scary nonetheless.
Yep.
Any other kind of last minute ones you kind of want to throw out there?
None that I can think of. I think we covered a lot though.
We did. We talked about a lot of things. I think we covered all the shows, TOS to Discovery. I think we hit every single series, which is, I think, fitting because I think all the shows kind of delve into this horror territory here and there. Got a little movie love in there with the Wrath of Khan and the City Out the Eels. So I'm pretty happy with the stuff that we talked about. The aliens from Silent Enemy and Enterprise, Grin Salem is mentioning. They are another good pick. They're kind of similar to 8472. They're CG generated. They have like long limbs, and you only see them in that one little scene in the corridor when they're like sucking the life out of those security officers. So that's a good pick that I didn't think of, and I'm ashamed because I'm such an Enterprise fanboy. But that's definitely a cool one-off deep cut pick from Grin Salem.
Yes.
And that just goes to show that we could talk all day and still not hit them all. So
exactly.
We're counting on people to throw out their choices and keep the list growing. Cool. Any Star Trek content you want to throw some love to? Anything you've listened to or watched?
I haven't. I've been taking a little break from everything Star Trek, even podcasts. I got a few to catch up on, and as far as Star Trek content too, there's definitely a lot. So, what about you?
I'm kind of in the same boat, unfortunately. I've been really busy at work, so it's cut down on my podcast listening time at work, where I get a lot done. But I did listen to the Larry Nemeczek live mission log about Runaway, which was really good. I listened to the Trek Ranks episode on Scariest episodes, which is kind of very similar to the topics we're talking about. And there was a lot of crossover. I didn't listen to it until after we did our episode last week, but I did listen to it before we got to this one. And there's definitely a lot of commonality there, which makes sense. So that's definitely a good episode that I would recommend to anybody. And I did get around to listening to our friend Rob, who's at the apparently awesome UK huge Star Trek convention right now. Who's usually with us here at the stream. He did a guest spot on Earl Grey on Trek FM, talking about the episode Lessons and Picard's relationship with Neela Darren, which is an episode we covered here on Trek Live with Jim Morehouse from Trek Ranks. We debated it. He's not a big fan. I'm a big fan. So we went toe to toe on that one and had a good time talking about it. But Rob did a really nice Earl Grey episode, kind of diving into that episode. So there's a lot of good stuff out there. Like I said, I'm hoping work dies down a little bit in the next week or so I can go into my backlog and catch up on a lot of the really good Star Trek content that I'm kind of getting backed up on.
Yep. I guess we can start winding it down. A little bit on the shorter side. Still was a great kind of discussion. The discussion doesn't have to stop here, as always. Come over to Discord, Facebook, Twitter. Keep the conversation alive. We'll be back next week, probably on Sunday again. And then,
Cool. Yeah, we have a couple of really good topics, I think, on the horizon. We have one with a guest that I'm pretty excited about that we'll talk about in the next week. Looking forward to kind of rolling that out. I'll introduce that topic and that person in the coming days. And that's a topic that I'd love to get some audience questions for. So I'll be pushing hard for that. We'll be building up to that one. So a lot of good stuff coming.
Yep. Yes. It's been episode 66. Definitely like, comment, subscribe. Keep the discussion going. All of our outlets. You guys know the drill. And we'll see you guys next week.
Yep. Thanks for watching.